I've heard it said that the opposite of love is indifference. I disagree. For me, the opposite of love is hate. I used to love my wife with all my heart and soul. I would have done anything for her, even taken a bullet. That's not the case anymore. She tore my heart out and destroyed my once happy life. Now it's time for me to destroy hers. The house was dark as I slowly made my way up the stairs, trying not to give myself away. The two cheaters in what was once my wife's bedroom couldn't hear me anyway, what with all the noise they were making. I got to the door, which was only partially closed, and pushed it the rest of the way open with the 12-gauge pump shotgun I had with me. There they were, my soon-to-be ex-wife Tobe and my boss Jake. My wife Alice and my boss Jake were there too. I pumped another round into the chamber and watched as the two stopped and stared at me, surprised. There's nothing quite like the sound of a round being pumped into the chamber of a shotgun to get someone's attention. What are you doing here? Wimp, you're supposed to. Why are you here? You want to watch a real man with your wife? Is that it? Are you some kind of pervert or something? Alice giggled at that. Yeah, baby. He wants to watch a real man give it to me good, Jake laughed as he stepped toward me. That's when it began. I said nothing as I fired at his crotch, blowing his private parts to kingdom come. He screamed in pain as he fell to the floor. Alice's screams joined his almost in perfect harmony. I pumped and fired again, this time taking off the top half of Jake's head. Alice kept screaming, so I turned my attention to her. The first shot silenced her screams as it removed most of her face. The next 15 rounds left her a bloody mess on the top of the bed. I wasn't finished yet and kept firing, alternating between Jake and Alice. At one point, I looked down and saw my feet were almost buried in a pile of spent shotgun shells. I wondered how many rounds were in the shotgun. I kept firing, pumping the shotgun and firing round after round into the mess that was Jake and Alice. I finally stopped. My rage had now gone. The room was empty of gunpowder, and I could see smoke hanging in the air like a thick blanket. I looked at the bloody mess and knew my life was over. I looked around at the mess I'd made and knew my life was over. When the police arrived, they'd probably shoot me dead if they didn't. I'd probably end up on death row. No thanks. I checked and found I still had 1 round left. I put the muzzle of the shotgun under my chin, then reached down and pulled I sat up in my bed, my body soaked with sweat. At first I didn't recognize my surroundings, but then it came back to me. I was at a Days Inn in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and had been since Sunday. It was now early Thursday morning. I was here to take care of a customer upgrade. Jake, the job was finished on Wednesday, and I'd finished my paperwork before going to bed. I'd planned to drive back after checking out of the hotel after sunrise, to clear my head after the night before. I caught my breath and looked at the clock. It was only 3:30 a.m. morning. I thought I'd never be able to get back to sleep. I got up out of bed, washed my face, then made a cup of coffee. I turned the television on and tried to calm myself down. This wasn't the first time I'd had a nightmare, and something told me it wouldn't be the last. It had been like this almost every night for the last week since I first learned of Alice's betrayal. Each nightmare was pretty similar, with the only difference being what I was using as a weapon. I remember one time I dreamed I was carrying a minigun and had shredded both their bodies with thousands of rounds of ammunition. In another dream, I actually carried a rocket-propelled grenade and blew them along with the bedroom into oblivion. Then there was the dream where I used a nuclear device and destroyed half the county, along with the two cheaters. I should mention that I'm not normally a violent man. Despite having spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, I had never once fired a weapon in anger. I do have a few guns, including a 12-gauge shotgun. Everyone in these parts has a gun or two, but I never once considered using any of them against another human. That's why I've recently undergone a change, as you might have guessed. My name is Thomas Jefferson Langley. My parents were really into history, so I was given that name from birth. My sister was named after Betsy Ross. I joined the Marines straight out of high school and was made a nuclear, biological, and chemical defense specialist, apart from a 1-year stint. After a year in Okinawa, Japani spent most of my time at St. Sides as an instructor. For the last 6 months of my service, I was one of the guys who ran the gas chamber at the base where I was stationed. I quickly realized that there was little to no use for someone with my skills in the civilian world, so I went back to school and got a degree in networks and business. It took me 3 years to finish my 2-year degree, so I left at the end of my 4-year contract. After my year-long stint, I went back to school, but I lost my benefits. When I graduated, I started working as an account representative for Empire Tech Solutions, a nationwide IT company based in my hometown in Missouri. I met Alice when I was doing a survey at the local newspaper. She worked as an editor and was one of the people who decided what photographs would we got on well with their articles. We talked and fell in love and eventually got married, which was 5 years ago. The next 4.5 years were good ones. Alice and I got along quite well and enjoyed spending time together whenever we could. We made love several times a week and began to talk about having children. We made pretty good money, so we bought an old 4-bedroom house. We bought a 4-bedroom farmhouse in the country that sat on 4 acres. It needed some work, but we both loved it. She liked the fact that it was a bit rustic, and I liked the separate shop that sat on the property. Both of us also liked the fact that the master bedroom had its own gas fireplace, and there was plenty of room for children. Then my boss Bill Michaels retired, and the company began searching for his replacement. I thought this would be a golden opportunity for me, so I applied for the job. Unfortunately, I didn't get it. I was told by John Carlson, who was in charge of the company's service operations nationwide, that I was a serious contender for the job, but Jake Harmon got it instead. I looked him up on the company internet and found that he was being moved here from Boston, where he worked as the senior account representative for the Northeast region of the country. He had a bit more seniority than me, but not that much. His uncle also happened to be one of the senior members of the board of directors, so he got the job. I studied the picture of his face and immediately disliked him. There was something about that crooked smile that made me think he'd be trouble. He came on board and made all the rounds, and the women in the office took to him like a moth to a flame. He was a few inches taller than me and quite muscular. He smiled that crooked smile as he shook my hand for the first time. "Well, I finally get to meet my opposition," he said. "I'm told you almost got my job. Don't worry, I won't let that interfere with our relationship." "I'm glad to hear that." I told him. He smiled and then left my office. Something about him really set me off, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. I told Alice about it one night after dinner. "Why don't you invite him over for dinner one night?" She said, "Maybe you can break the ice with him. Is he married?" I shook my head. "I don't think so. I didn't see that in his online bio. Maybe he's just a bit lonely. A single guy in a new town surrounded by strange faces. It can't be easy for him to adjust, especially after living in Boston. Maybe." You were right. I invited him to dinner the next day and he was really excited about it. "You're welcome to bring your family if you want." I told him there's no family, it's just me, but I'd love to come have dinner with you and your wife. "Thanks for the invite. Should I bring anything?" "Just your appetite." I said, "Okay, I'll be there." He arrived at the house on time and we had a good evening. We got to know each other a bit and I thought we had established a bit of a rapport. Alice went all out, making a pot roast with. She made potatoes and vegetables, and even put some in a Tupperware container for him to take home. Alice said he seemed like a decent guy after he left. Yeah, I guess so. I still had doubts though. That pot roast was amazing, by the way. "Let me help you with the dishes, then I'll thank you properly," I added, giving her a little nudge. She giggled, then pranced into the dining room to start putting things away. The next day at work, Jake came by my office. "I just wanted to thank you for dinner last night. That pot roast your wife made was delicious." "Yes, Alice is a very good cook." He smiled as he nodded his head. I couldn't help but wonder what else he was thinking. "Listen, Tom, I'm going to need you to start making more trips out of town. I know my predecessor limited your time out of town, but I'm concerned we may see some business slip if we don't get a bit more aggressive." "What are we talking about?" "I'd like to make 1 trip a week at the most. I know it may be tough on things with Alice, but I'll make sure you get well compensated for your time away from home." "When do you think this will start?" I asked next week, but he said that wasn't. "I'd like you to go to St. Louis on Monday. Peter and Leo are talking about updating some of their servers in preparation for tax time. So I'd like you to assess the situation and make some recommendations. Normally this would be done remotely, but I'd like you to be a bit more hands-on." Peters and Ram were an accounting firm we'd done business with for years. I'd never heard of an upgrade, so I asked how long it'd take. You know, it shouldn't take me more than a few hours at most. You forget they have satellite offices all over the city. You'll need to visit them all. I thought that could take 2 or 3 days, maybe even 4. All right, I'll let Alice know. She's not going to be happy. I think she'll get over it when she sees your paycheck. Jake said before leaving my office that Alice wasn't happy with me being gone. I was gone for 4 days, but I took her out to dinner and dancing that night, and we spent much of the weekend in bed. Call me when you get settled in and I'll expect a call every day. She said that when I packed my bags in the car. Fortunately, St. Louis was close enough that I could drive there. You'd better be on your best behavior, right? I asked before giving her a kiss. I called her cell phone when I got settled into my room in St. Louis. Later that evening, after my first meeting with the client, I called the house phone every night. We enjoyed nice long discussions. As it turned out, I was finished with the client early Thursday morning, so I drove home planning to surprise my wife. We had a great reunion, and I thought everything would be all right. The next couple of weeks were fine, but after that, things started to change. The trips got longer, and for the next 4 weeks, I was gone for 4 days, with one trip lasting 5 full days. Jake was true to his word, and I did see a hefty increase in my paychecks, but that hardly compensated for the time I was away from Alice. Alice was coping with my absences at first, but I could tell they were starting to affect her after the 4th week. When I got home that week, I thought I smelled cigarettes. Both Alice and I smoked when we first met, but after we got married, we decided to quit. It was tough at first, but we managed to make it work. We've been smoke-free for about 2 years now. When this started, I asked Alice if she'd been smoking while I was away. I'm sorry, it's just so hard when you're not here. I understand. You realize I have no choice. Jake's the one sending me out. I understand, but I just don't like it. I wish you were home more often. I do too. Maybe I'll have a chat with Jake and see if he'll be a bit more flexible. I did talk to Jake about it, but he put me off and said it was part of the job. If I didn't like it, he said, I was out of luck. Welcome to the world of looking for a new job like a good company man with bills to pay. I put up with it for a while, but I did look for another job about a week later. I just got back from a trip and was getting ready for bed when Alice asked me to turn on the fireplace. We both enjoyed having it on as we made love, so I went to turn it on. That's when I noticed the pilot light was out. I wondered what could make that happen and couldn't get it to stay lit, so I turned off the gas to the unit. I made a mental note to call in a technician because of my schedule. I had it on as we made love, so I went to turn it on. That's when I noticed the pilot light was out. I wondered what could make that happen and couldn't get it to stay lit, so I turned off the gas to the unit and made a mental note to call in a technician. Because of my schedule, it took a couple of weeks before I could get anyone out to take a look at it. It took a couple of weeks before I could get anyone to come and take a look at it. The technician did his diagnostics and then looked up at me and shook his head. I'm sorry, Mr. Langley, but that regulator has failed. It's probably been in there for at least 60 years. Can you replace it? I'm surprised it's lasted as long as it has without causing problems. You realize you could have had a serious incident if I were you. I'd replace the whole insert. I'm not sure when I'll have the time to do that. My schedule is pretty full at the moment. He gave me a card and said, when you get a chance, come by and take a look at what we have. We have units with remote controls, and one you can control with your smartphone over the internet. In the meantime, I'd keep the gas shut off to that thing. Otherwise, you could have a serious problem. I thanked him and took his card. Unfortunately, I never got around to replacing the insert, despite Alice's constant reminders. Jake kept sending me out, sometimes over the weekend. As a result, things got very frosty in the house. Our intimate life all but disappeared, and Alice started getting very short and snippy with me. I did my best to stay calm, but it wasn't easy as the trips continued. Alice got even worse. Jake didn't seem to care, though, as he kept sending me out to one client or another. When I called the home phone, I also tried calling Alice on her cell, but it went straight to voicemail. When I asked her about it, she just offered excuses. I decided to go out for a drink with the girls, and I didn't hear the phone ring. She would say the worst possible thing. I finished my site visit a day early and decided to come home to surprise Alice. As it turned out, I was the one who got the surprise. I pulled into our driveway and saw Jake's BMW sitting in front of our garage. I wondered what he was doing there. I got out and put my hand on the hood. I could see that it was warm on the hood of his car, so I knew he hadn't been there long. I went into the house and saw Alice sitting on the couch with Jake. She quickly pulled her hands back as I opened the door. And I also took note of what she was wearing, a short black dress that showed off a lot of leg and a lot of cleavage. She was wearing a short black dress that showed off a lot of leg and cleavage. There was a thick smell of cigarette smoke in the house. "Tom, you're home," she said, standing up. Jake also stood up and looked at me, a smirk on his face. "Yes, this is a surprise. You were supposed to be gone until tomorrow," he said. "What happened?" "I came home early from work to spend some time with my wife." "What's going on here?" I asked. "Jake said he was just going to take me out to dinner." Alice said. Jake smirked as I nodded my head. "I see," I said. I turned to Jake before speaking. "Well, I'm home now, so if anyone is taking Alice out, it'll be me and her husband. I think you should leave now. If I don't, I'll just have to ask you to leave my house. You may be my boss at work, but not here in my home." He chuckled and looked at Alice. "I'll take care of this, Alice. You should leave now, Jake." He didn't say anything for a few moments, then nodded and got ready to leave. "I'll be discussing this with John tomorrow," I said before Jake opened the door to leave. "You better not say anything to John. You forget my uncle is He's a senior member of the board, so he'll have your job as well as John's. And don't forget you're supposed to be in Jonesboro on Sunday." He turned to Alice and said, "I'll talk with you later." He added before closing the door, "What the hell is going on? Are you sleeping with him now?" She didn't say anything, but she looked down at the floor, embarrassed. I had my answer. "You are, aren't you? How long has this been going on?" "A while, I bet." "Damn it, Tom. You're never home." "Yeah, because the guy you're with keeps sending me out of town." "My God, Alice. How can you be so stupid? You knew he was the one sending me away. Surely you're smart enough to figure out what he was doing. How many times have you been intimate with him in our bed?" "I don't know, I haven't counted." I asked her what she asked. "Well, it means I'll be getting a divorce as soon as I can. There's no way I can put up with this. Please, Tom, don't." "I don't want a divorce." "So what? You think you can have Jake when he sends me away? Then give me his sloppy seconds when I get home." "I've never given you sloppy seconds," she said. "You haven't given me anything in a couple of months." "Alice, how could you be so selfish? I'm not going to sleep in the bed again, not after you've been with him in it, and there's no place else here for me to sleep. I'm not going to try sleeping on the couch. Besides, the whole place reeks of cigarettes. Do you let him smoke in here?" "I'm sorry." I stood up and looked at her before speaking, trying to control my rage. "Let me get one thing straight. I'm going to find a motel room for the night. I'll come by tomorrow while you're at work to get some of my stuff. If you bring that into my house again before the divorce is final, you'll both regret it." "God, you'd never been born," Alice said, tears falling down her face. I couldn't help but wonder why she was crying, since she's the one who caused all the hurt. I went upstairs to grab a suitcase and some clothes and saw the ashtrays on both nightstands. They were both filled. The room was filled with ashes and cigarette butts, and it was redolent of stale cigarette smoke and intimacy. I was overwhelmed and on the verge of vomiting. I packed enough things for a couple of days and went back downstairs. Alice was still on the couch. "I'm leaving now," I said, taking off my wedding ring. I tossed the ring on the table in front of her. "I won't be needing that anymore. Remember what I said. Goodbye." I walked out of the house, got in my car, and left. I don't know what she did after I left, and I frankly didn't care. All I know is that she didn't call or text me after. After I left, I found a motel that rented rooms with kitchens by the week and paid for 2 weeks in advance. I had a feeling I would be there a bit longer than that, though, and I didn't want to risk the room being taken when I got back from Jonesboro. I got settled in, and that night was when the nightmares started the next day. I got to work a bit early and put all my paperwork in order, avoiding Jake. I went to see John Carlson, who was the next person in my chain of command. "Tom, you're here early. How did everything go?" "Well, John, I've already put in my paperwork. Listen, I have a personal issue I need to resolve before I leave for Jonesboro. Do you think I could take the rest of the day off?" "Have you spoken with Jake yet?" he asked. "Well, Jake is part of the problem," I said. He looked at me startled. "Oh, you want to tell me about it?" I told him what had happened the previous evening and what Alice had told me. I also told him that I needed to get more of my things and go see a divorce lawyer today. That's why I came to you instead of going to Jake. "I see. Go ahead and do what you need to. I'll take care of Jake. If you want to talk, I'm here for you." I thanked him and left the building. I managed to avoid Jake. I stopped at a coffee shop and grabbed breakfast while searching the web for a divorce lawyer on my smartphone. I found one and made an appointment for that afternoon. After I finished my breakfast, I looked at the time and figured Alice would be gone to work, so I headed to what used to be our house. Her car was nowhere to be found, so I parked and went inside. The place was still raked of cigarettes, but it wasn't as bad as the night before. I went upstairs and got some more of my things, then carried them to my car. I grabbed some trash bags and filled them up with as much as I could carry, then put those in the car as well. I figured I would need a storage unit for all this stuff, so I made a note to rent one that day. I went into my shop and took inventory of everything I had there. I couldn't stash all this in the car, so I knew I would have to come back for it. Then I found something I forgot I had, a small round container with about 10 old CS training tablets, the kind I used to. CS is a tear gas that's commonly used by the police and military. It's not technically a gas like hydrogen or oxygen. It's more like tiny particles that get into everything, including clothes, hair, eyes, and so on. We use these tablets to simulate a chemical attack when we hold gas chamber training, and they're extremely effective. When I was in the service, we would typically take 1 or 2 of these tablets and place them on a metal plate, which would then be heated. The capsules melt and release the gas. 2 capsules were usually enough for a decent gas chamber exercise. A person exposed to CS would experience a burning sensation on exposed skin, tearing of the eyes, and a burning irritation of the mucous membranes of the nose, mouth, and throat. This results in coughing, extreme nasal discharge, disorientation, and difficulty breathing. It's not a pleasant sensation, but it passes fairly quickly after a shower. I used to conduct impromptu field training by surreptitiously sprinkling some CS powder in ashtrays. This was usually when we went into the chemical reacts with heat, so anyone who used the ashtray would find them in their own personal little gas chamber. I had a thought and took the capsules into the house. I opened a capsule and sprinkled the powder in one ashtray, then did the same to the other. If Alice and Jake wanted to have a cigarette after dinner, they'd be in for a surprise. I thought I'd go through the house and do the same with a couple of other ashtrays I found, but I didn't stop there. I took a couple of capsules. I opened them up and sprinkled the powder on the bottom sheet of the bed and the 2 pillows, then carefully replaced the top sheet and the bedspread. I thought about sprinkling a bit of C's on the stove, but decided against it. I only had 4 capsules left, and I wanted to have enough for a return trip. I figured that what I had already done would be enough to cause a bit of coitus interruptus, at least for now. The last thing was to collect my guns, my personal laptop, and our tax forms for the last 2 years, which the lawyer said she wanted to see. I locked the guns. I stashed my stuff in the boot of my car and locked up the house. I went to a storage facility, rented a small space, and stashed my stuff until I could find another place I could call home. When I finished unloading my car, I locked the storage unit and noticed I had just enough time for a quick burger before my appointment with the lawyer. I arrived at the law office of Lisa Hawkins right on time and was ushered into her office. She listened to my story, taking notes as I spoke. She didn't say anything until after I had finished. "Well, Mr. Langley, that's quite a story, do you? I'm sorry to say that there's no way to put your marriage back together. Missouri is a limited no-fault state, but you can cite her adultery as a reason to affect the distribution of the marital assets. You don't have any children, so there won't be any issues with child support. I can see from the tax forms you brought in that your wife made just a little less than you, but in my opinion, that's not enough to warrant any spousal maintenance. What about the house? Do you want to keep that? Split the proceeds, but I doubt you have much equity in the place. I suggest you sell it and see what she says in her response." "That's fine. Can I go after Jake for what he did?" She shook her head. "You mean for alienation of affection?" I nodded no. "I'm afraid it's not an option in Missouri. It hasn't been since about 2003 you say he's your boss. I said, well, then I'd recommend you go over his head, maybe speak with his boss or your company's HR department. You work for Empire Tech, is that right? She asked. I said, yes, you're in luck. I happen to. They don't tolerate that kind of behavior. Speak to them and let them know what's going on. I'm sure they'll work with you if they don't come back, and we'll discuss it. That sounds good, thanks. I replied, all right, I'll get the paperwork started. Where would you like her served at? It would be great if we could meet at the office. Lisa smiled at that. Just don't do anything stupid. The court won't look at that very kindly. I'd also recommend you see a counselor. She pulled out a card and handed it to me. I recognized the name Dr. Rose Carlson. John's wife got it, thanks. We wrapped up the meeting and I paid a retainer after she handed me a checklist of things to do that she said would help protect me financially. We only had one joint credit card through our bank, so I canceled it and withdrew half of what we had in. I opened a new account in my name at the bank and grabbed a bite to eat before heading back to the motel. I didn't hear from Alice until later that evening. I recognized her number on my smartphone and decided to take the call. Right then, I knew exactly what happened. I don't know what you're talking about. I lied. Yes, you do. You bastard. You put something in the ashtrays and there's something in the bed. You mean besides you and Jake? I asked, damn it, tell me what you did. We can't even use the bedroom. The next voice was that of my boss, and he wasn't happy. Tom, what did you do? The whole place is like a gas chamber or something. I'm going to kick you. What are you doing in my bed with my wife? You son of a blip. If anyone deserves to get his ass kicked, it's you. You're going to. You'll pay for this, he threatened. I'll make sure to pass your little threat on to John and my attorney. I ended the call and started counting to 10. The phone rang again before I got to 7. I ignored the call and let it go to voicemail. I couldn't help but smile, thinking about what something told me they wouldn't be using that bed tonight. I slept pretty well that night, except for the one nightmare where I dreamed about blowing the two cheaters away with a machine gun. I slept in the next day and didn't roll out of bed until about 10:30. I drove to an IHOP for a late breakfast and was surprised when Alice sat at my table. What a surprise. How did you sleep last night? I asked. I think you know how I slept last night. I was driving by and saw your car, so I thought I would stop in and see you. What do you want, Alice? I'm trying to enjoy a good breakfast. I want to talk about us. There is no us anymore. You made that happen when you decided to be with my boss. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just lonely, she replied. You think I wasn't? You knew perfectly well I was gone because your buddy sent me away. I saw an attorney yesterday. She's working up divorce papers. You should get served sometime next week. But I don't want a divorce, she said quietly. I don't want a cheating woman for a wife. Don't worry. I'm letting you keep the house. Unless you want to sell it. Either way is good for me. Your credit card no longer works. I found out this morning. I tried to pay for gas and had to use cash. So, tell me what you did to the house yesterday. I have no idea what you're talking about. I simply came by to get some more of my things, especially my guns and my computer. Tell me what happened. Well, Jake and I were enjoying a cigarette in the bedroom before going to bed. I know you don't like smoking in the house, but we figured you weren't coming back, so it wouldn't make any difference. Right after we ground our cigarettes out, we both started feeling a burning sensation. We started coughing, and there was snot hanging out of our noses. I knew you had done something, but I didn't know what it was. Well, I guess you won't be smoking in the bedroom anymore. So, what did you do? Did you go to Jake's apartment? Yeah, we spent the night there. Nothing happened, though. Neither one of us was up to it by then. That's just too bad, I told her sarcastically. So, what are you doing now? I'm going back to air out the place and clean up the bedroom. Look, I know things are over between us, but I was wondering, is there any way we could? I just wanted to make sure we could at least part as friends. I couldn't believe the nerve of this woman. I put my fork down and looked at her before saying anything. You did the worst possible thing a woman can do to someone. You claimed to love me, but you betrayed my trust and broke my heart by being intimate with my boss in my house and in my bed. And you have the nerve to ask if we can be friends. Let me tell you something, woman. Right now it's taking everything I have to keep from killing you right here with my bare hands. Her eyes got really big as I spoke and her face turned white. She asked, with tears streaming down her face, if I still had feelings for her. I said that I used to love her with all my heart, but that I didn't love her as much as I used to. I said that I hated her, and she sniffed. I said that I'd tell Jake if he messed with me, and I'd rip his Johnson off and feed it to the dogs. Alice recoiled as I spoke. She'd never seen this side of me before. She grabbed her purse and stood up. If you don't mind, I'd like to finish my breakfast in peace, please. The sight of you makes me feel sick to my stomach. I'm sorry, Tom. She sobbed before she turned and left. I watched her get into her car and drive off. Good riddance to bad trash, I thought to myself. I couldn't help but smile, though, knowing they hadn't encountered the CSI sprinkled on the bed. I spent the rest of the day doing pretty much nothing. I drove around, walked in the park, and then ended up watching a game in a bar while drinking a couple of beers. I thought about going to the house to get more of my stuff, but I decided against it, not knowing how I could handle being around Alice afterwards. I went back to the motel and got my stuff together for the trip to Jonesboro. I heard from Alice once on Tuesday. She said she wasn't very happy and felt humiliated when the process server said she was being served divorce papers for her adultery. How could you humiliate me like that, she asked. How could you humiliate me by being intimate with my... I ended the call annoyed. I also got a threatening email from Jake, which I forwarded to John. John wrote me back, saying not to worry about Jake. If all goes well, he'll be gone by the end of the week. I thought, good, he can take the cheating woman with him. Now I'm getting ready to head back. In a way, it's probably good that I wasn't in town to deal with the cheaters. These last few days, there's no telling what I might have done. Looking at the clock, I saw that it was nearing 5. It's 0. I was on my way home at about 6:00 p.m. I decided to take a shower, grab some breakfast, and head back. I was on the road heading home at about 6. On Thursday at 30, I had a long drive ahead of me, so I used the time to unwind. As I approached my hometown, I turned on the radio to my favorite local station, hoping to hear the morning news. I heard that at least one person is dead, and another is in critical condition after firefighters responded to an incident on Old Mill Road. That's the road where my house is. I thought I turned up the volume and listened further. According to reports, an explosion tore off the second story of an old farmhouse on Old Mill Road late Wednesday night. Firefighters responded but were unable to control the blaze. 2 people were pulled from the house. 1 was pronounced dead at the scene. It's not known what started the fire. I had a feeling something bad had happened, so I decided to swing by the house just in case. When I got there, I was shocked at what I saw. The house was completely destroyed, and all that remained were smoking ruins and the brick fireplace. I saw 2 vehicles by the shop. One was Alice's, and the other appeared to be Jake's. The shop is where all my tools were. I saw that the house was still there, so I pulled in and was stopped by a couple of firefighters. They told me I had to leave. I showed them my license and said, "This is my house. I've been in Jonesboro since Sunday." They said someone had reported an explosion late last night. We got here as fast as we could. I couldn't get there in time. I heard on the radio that 2 people were pulled out. My wife was one of them. What happened to her? Well, sir, a woman was pulled out of the house. She was pretty badly injured and was taken to the burn center at the hospital in town. I don't know who she was, and I haven't gotten any updates on her condition. The other person I asked, the firefighter, looked down before shaking his head. I'm sorry, sir. He didn't make it. I got to my motel, called John to tell him the news, and asked him to pass on my apologies. I also wanted to let you know that the board agreed to terminate Jake's employment yesterday. He was going to be fired today, so I thought you might want to go by the hospital and check up on Alice. Take the rest of the day off if you like. Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow. I went to the hospital and found the ward where Alice had been taken to hospital. I spoke briefly to the nurse on duty and gave her my insurance information. That's when I learned she had 2nd and 3rd degree burns covering more than half of her body. She's very lucky to be alive. The nurse said, "Can I see her?" I asked, "Not right now. We've got her on antibiotics and she's been sedated." The doctor says she's probably going to need. I was told that I could see her again after she'd had some skin grafts. I gave the nurse my cell number and went back to my room to have a good cry. I don't know why I was so upset. Maybe it was because I'd spent so many years with Alice. What I do know is that I'd stopped hating her. Before she met Jake, she was the love of my life. I went online and filed a claim with my insurance company. The site said I'd be informed of their intentions within 30 days. That night was the first time I slept without experiencing my nightmare. Over the next few days, I confirmed that Jake had died in the initial explosion. John also informed me that Jake's job was now mine if I wanted it. I thought I could take it on. I decided to take it since it would mean more money and not much travel. I spent a couple of days looking for a decent apartment and found one. I moved my stuff in, set up the house, and spent a weekend pulling my tools from the old shop while I was there. I walked through the ruins of our house looking for anything that could possibly be salvaged, but sadly I found nothing useful. Nothing useful came of it. A few days later I got a call from the hospital saying I could see and talk with Alice. I walked into her room and looked at her. Most of her body was covered in bandages. I walked to the side of her bed and looked down at her. She looked up at me with one eye and I could see the tears falling down her face. I asked her, "Can you talk?" She nodded her head slightly. She nodded and mouthed, "Yes, what happened?" "We went out on Wednesday night. When we got back, I asked Jake to turn on the fireplace in the bedroom. He got it lit on Monday and we used it for 2 nights without any problem. What don't you remember? I told you to keep the gas to that thing shut off until the insert was replaced. What were you thinking?" "I'm sorry," she said. "Go on." Jake saw the pilot was out, so he checked to see if the gas was turned on. He lit a match to start the pilot, and that's when it happened. I heard a loud boom, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up here. That's why I shut the gas off to that thing. I told you it was too dangerous to turn on. I guess I forgot." She started crying. I could see tears falling down her face. "The house is completely demolished, just like our marriage. I really messed everything up, didn't I?" I told her, "Yes, you did. I've already told you there's no us anymore. You messed that up too. The divorce will go ahead. I'll keep you on my insurance until you get through this. Thanks for that. Do you still hate me? Not as much as before, but I still don't like you much." "I understand, Tom," she said. "Anyway, I'll get out of your hair for now. I just hope you've learned your lesson." "What's that?" "I was asked if you play with fire, you're going to get burned." I said that before walking out of the room. Much to my surprise, the insurance company came through for me, and I got a check for the damage to the house. There wasn't much left after the mortgage was paid off, and I had no intention of rebuilding, so I talked with Alice, and we agreed to sell the property and split the proceeds. She remained in the property. She was in hospital for quite some time, on an extended paid leave of absence while she recuperated. The divorce went through as my lawyer said it would, and in 60 days I was a free man. In the meantime, I had started seeing Rose, who was doing a great job of helping me through my anger issues. I kept my word to Alice and kept her on my insurance until she was healed enough. The doctors did a great job on her, and the skin graft seemed to take hold just fine. She wasn't as beautiful as she was when we married, but she still looked pretty good despite her scars. As a final gesture, I helped her get set up in a new apartment. I handed her the keys to the place after the furniture was moved in. "I hope you like it. I made sure to pick one." "Oh, it doesn't have a fireplace," she laughed as she took the keys. "Thank you, Tom," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "I appreciate that you're a good man, Tom. You deserve a good woman." "I'm sorry I messed everything up for us," I said, nodding. "Yeah, well, I guess that's the way it goes," she replied. I told her, "You take care of yourself." "I will," she said before I walked out. "What now?" I asked. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I couldn't believe how many women had given me their numbers over the past few months. I found the number I was looking for and called. "Hello?" I heard a female voice say. "Yeah, this is Tom. You busy tonight?" "I'm free," I replied. "I met Nancy a couple of weeks ago at a club in town. She had the deepest blue eyes and legs that. Would you like some more lasagna?" she asked. "You know it." I said, "Well, come on over. I'll warm it up for you. I'm on my way. Please leave your comments below and let's start a conversation. If you enjoyed this story, please like it. And if you're new here or haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day. So please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.